Ambassador, thank you very much for this interview. In your last appearances in this period, you used very positive tone concerning the name issue. Are you still optimistic after this round of consultation of talks that solution is possible in near future? Is this really the historic window of opportunity that we are talking about?
I definitely think this is a historic opportunity. Now, whether we reach a solution, we still have some ways to go. But I think we're closer now than we've ever been. And I think the will on both sides, at the leadership level, and also among, I think, most of the people, is positive. I think people believe the time has come to resolve this issue. Let's get it behind us. Let's move forward. And recognizing that there are issues, recognizing we haven't quite solved them all, but I think we're moving in the right direction.
You came up with a framework with your set of ideas, as you call it. You heard the comments. Do you know which way the process will go on in the future? Maybe you're going to make some specific adjustments to the suggestions that you made in the following period of the process.
Yeah. Well, we're still talking about the process. In both Athens and Skopje, not everyone was happy with everything I said in my ideas, but these are meant to be suggestions to the parties to move them closer. Obviously, if one side was overjoyed with what I wrote and the other side was totally unhappy, it wouldn't be a fair attempt at a compromise. So I made some suggestions, and I hear from both sides their views. I think now I will try to pull some of this together, but also the two foreign ministers have a dialogue. They know each other well, and I think they're the people, the two governments, who ultimately will see whether they can work out a solution.
Are you close to making a specific, concrete proposal?
Well, my ideas were fairly concrete. Now I think that hearing from both sides, one can eliminate some ideas, one can refine them, and narrow some of the differences. Some issues may be solved. Some issues may get a little more difficult. But I'm optimistic at this stage that solutions can be found to resolve this difference.
What do you think about Greek idea to offer Macedonia some kind of draft framework? Isn't this in a collision with what you do as a mediator?
Yeah. Well, my view of my mediation is to be helpful to the parties, right? So I represent the United Nations. I don't have an ego aspect to this. If whatever way the two sides feel they can get closer, in who presents what, where we meet, who comes up with what, let's let the process move forward. There's a lot of goodwill in Athens, in the government, to move this rapidly to a positive conclusion. I think that's a very positive sign. Here in Skopje, too, the government is positively inclined. So exactly how we will do this is up to the parties.
Foreign Minister Kotsias, in one of his recent interviews, talked about the issue in details. After that, reaction from Macedonian Ministry of Foreign Affairs followed, saying that talking in public about red lines just narrows the space for coming up to a solution. What do you think about, let's say, Foreign Minister Kotsias' interviews and positions, and the reaction that followed from Macedonian side in the overall process?
Yeah. In an ideal world, no one would say anything. You know? So, in an ideal world, I would present a paper and nothing would leak out. But we have something in both countries that's two things. One, real democracy in both countries, and very vigorous press. People like you. So with the type of press you have, and the people's desire to know, government officials feel a responsibility to speak. And so I don't criticize government officials for speaking when they speak. This is their prerogative. They get elected. They have these positions. They have to deal with their constituencies. If they don't speak at all, they get criticized. If they say too much, they get criticized. The leadership in Athens, the leadership in Skopje, my view is if they do what they have to do, and it is not for me to criticize them. Sometimes it makes my job easier, sometimes it makes it more difficult.
Before your visit to Skopje, you were in Athens, where you also met with the Greek opposition. Mm-hmm. What's your assessment on the political situation in Athens? Will a solution, eventual solution on the name issue pass in the Greek parliament?
Yeah. So I said once in Greece, I have two rules. One is I never discuss Greek politics, and that's rule number one. Rule number two is never forget rule number one. So I don't get involved in the politics there, and I don't get involved in the politics here. The government is negotiating something. They will need to bring it to Parliament. They have a strong government and very skillful political leadership. It's for them to decide how to handle this, and I think I leave it in their hands. I don't make a prediction. I think that there's a lot of goodwill to solve this problem. There are also political considerations of the parties, and they'll work it out their way.
How do you see these so-called goodwill gestures on both sides? Decision to rename the airport and the highway. On the other hand, we have permitting Macedonia to go forward in the second stage of stabilization association agreement with the European Union.
Yeah. Well, I thought these came out of the Davos meeting of the two prime ministers last week. I think this was a major step forward, of historic dimensions almost, because the two prime ministers of these two countries, I don't remember a better meeting between the two prime ministers in all the years that I've been working on this, and that goes back to 1994, 95 period. So I give them a lot of credit. I give Prime Minister Zaev a lot of credit for making these important gestures to create goodwill in the region, goodwill with the neighbor.
Let's go more in details about your latest set of ideas, which more or less leaked in public here and also in Greece. What is your explanation for using untranslated compound names with geographical qualifier?
I don't really want to get into this. I know these things have leaked out, but not everything is leaked out. I don't think the entire paper. Maybe it has, but I haven't seen it leaked. And there are other aspects of the paper that deal with issue of translation and other things. So the way you phrase it isn't 100% correct if you read the whole paper. But I think that it's not a good idea for me to get involved in the details.
It seems like that the scope of usage is one of the most sensitive elements of the whole package, especially having in mind Greek demands for constitutional changes. What about this aspect of the question?
Well, this is a scope of usage. When you use a modified name is a key issue. It's been a key issue for all the years I've worked on this matter. So I gave my ideas on this, and again, I think this has to be worked out in the negotiation. And as to the method of legal methods within the country of making changes and implementation, to me this is legal questions within this country. So again, I know it'd be maybe a better interview from your point of view if I gave very concrete answers on some of these, but I can't really give you a concrete answer on that part.
While you were in Athens, did you understand where Greek side sees irredentism in the Constitutional Republic of Macedonia?
Yeah. You know, this issue of irredentism is a serious issue, and it's something that preoccupies your southern neighbor. It has different manifestations given the historical relationships, the history of the region, the relationships between the people. So there's a lot of sensitivity in Greece that you need to understand. You may not agree with how they view the situation, but one has to understand that this is a sensitive issue. It was raised with me by the government, raised with me by the opposition, and one sees it in the attitude of people. So incidents that give neighbors a feeling that some groups have aspirations. This is an issue that's of concern. I think your government has behaved correctly in this regard, but incidents come up from time to time, which get magnified and need to be addressed.
In interview for Greek press, for Greek paper Katamirian, you said that constitutional experts shall decide whether there is a need of constitutional changes or not. I want to ask you whether or not international agreement ratified by, according with the Article 118 of Constitutional Republic of Macedonia and UN resolutions, is not a guarantee enough for Greece that what has been agreed is going to be implemented.
You know, the Greek position it's up to the Greeks to present their position. It's not for me. I can do it, especially not publicly. But obviously, in both sides, there's a desire and a need to feel comfortable that implementation will take place. So one needs, through this dialogue and through this process, to find solutions to make each side comfortable that the other side is able to fulfill the commitments it makes.
And you felt that Greek side is more comfortable if there are changes to the Constitutional Republic of Macedonia regarding this issue?
They raised the question. You've heard it publicly from them of whether that's legally needed in order to implement commitments that might be made. Since we don't have the agreement yet, we don't know exactly what's in the agreement. But that's a position.
Speaking of the scope of usage, does international use of any new agreed name envisages this new name to be present on the passports and on the other ID documents that are in international communication, used in international communications?
Yeah.
This is also one big issue of the whole package.
Yeah. I think that passports are an international document, and we haven't addressed all these issues yet. I would think that passports would be an international document that if there is agreement on a modification of the name. It would be applicable to documents like passports.
When you speak about guarantees, now let's turn the table. What are the guarantees on Macedonian side that Athens, Greek government, will play by the book, and that everything that has been agreed upon she will uphold it? You know, that everything that has been put on the table is going to be workable also from Greek side.
Yeah. Well, this is why there's a dialogue between the two countries. This is why you need an agreement. I will say that in my experience, countries do fulfill agreements. When they don't fulfill them, there are mechanisms for dealing with it. But in this case, there clearly is a concern on both sides as to whether the other side is able to fulfill the commitments. So you know, when you're in that posture and there's a concern, there's a history of not complete trust, one has to overcome them. And I think that the leadership of both countries are working very hard to overcome this sense of lack of trust. But it takes political will. It also takes legal documentation. So we try on both sides.
Is this lack of trust between both sides why you suggested phased implementation of the possible solution?
Yeah, well, not everything can be done instantaneously. We live in a world where some things take a certain amount of time, and so sometimes it's a good idea to have a transition period. If one can do something instantaneously, then the world will be much simpler. But I think Einstein once said that the reason for having time is that not everything can be done instantaneously. So that's the reason for some type of transitions.
What was Athens' stance position on this phase?
Well, they raised a number of issues on my ideas. I'm not going to get into what they told me here. On some of the things I suggested, they thought they were okay. Some of the things they had questions about, and some of the things they didn't really like very much. So they have alternative ideas. And in Skopje too, you know, not everything I suggest is perfectly acceptable. So, but I'm very satisfied that I put down concrete ideas after a lot of talking, a lot of thinking, and the two sides take them very seriously. They study them, they think about them, and then they come to their views. And I hope to influence them in thinking. Even if they don't agree, it makes them think, well, maybe Nimetz is not really right on this, and it doesn't serve our purpose exactly. But
they actively participate.
But they then can think of something that might work. So this is the process.
The feeling based on statements from Foreign Minister of Greece, Nikos Koudzias, is that Athens understands that designation for the language should be Macedonian or at least Makedonski, which is also a huge part of the whole possible package.
Yeah, again, I don't want to put words in the mouth of either side, of what they like or what they don't like. They've made some statements, so you interpret it one way or the other, but I'm not going to publicly interpret them, even when I think they may have said something positive, but let them say what their position is, and your government here state its position.
Do you have any information or any feeling that some of the key international players are interested in getting more present diplomatically, more robust presence in the whole negotiation process in this period?
Yeah. Well, of course, I hear from member countries of the United Nations, because I'm a United Nations representative, so I talk to other members of the United Nations. I think it's fair to say that almost everyone I talk to internationally would like this problem resolved. People have a good feeling towards both countries. They're friendly to both countries. They think this is a tough issue, but a long-standing dispute that should be resolved for the security of this region and for European the health of the region, the Balkans, Southeast Europe, Europe generally. So people want to be helpful, and the European Union wants to be helpful. Whether they get involved in the negotiations, no one's come to me and said they want to jump in to actually change things or suggest new things. I've gotten a lot of support from countries, from the EU, from others, the European Commission, to try to be helpful. And people rely on the two governments to try to resolve this.
In what direction the process will continue? When do you expect to host joint meeting with the ministers of foreign affairs from both countries?
So I'm in talks with both of them about the process, and we haven't reached an agreement on exact date or exact methodology for moving forward. But I think, in my view, we should move within weeks. I mean, this is not something that should be stretched out. Why do I say that? I think there's a certain momentum, and a positive momentum. I do know that there's opposition in both countries to some of the ideas, and even maybe opposition to having an agreement. But I think the governments of both countries want an agreement. And I think the people of both countries would love to have this settled. So we've talked about this now for 25 years. The issues are on the table. We know the issues. We know possible solutions. I think I said the other day, this is a time for decision, not for more just abstract talk. We need to sit down and say, can we actually resolve it? And I think with the leadership in both countries, some good ideas on the table, we make a real effort to do it.
Ambassador, thank you very much for this interview.
Thank you very much. Thanks. Good.